A unique or lesser known detail is that in some cultures, edible clays were not only consumed during times of scarcity, but also considered a delicacy or a medicinal tonic. In parts of Georgia, the country, for instance, edible clays are marketed and consumed as a snack, sometimes seasoned. In Haiti, mud cookies made from clay, vegetable shortening, and salt are still consumed during times of hardship, a testament to the persistence of an ancient practice. This shows how blurred the lines between survival food and cultural food can become over time. The sun, a relentless eye, begins its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Your stomach, however, remains a dark, empty canvas. You've scoured the land, peeled the bark, gnawed on bones, and even considered a particularly plump beetle. Yet, despite all your efforts, some potential food sources remain stubbornly out of reach, locked away by bitterness, toxicity, or indigestibility. But ancient ingenuity, ever resourceful, discovered a silent, invisible army that could transform the dangerous into the delicious, the inedible into the life-sustaining. Welcome to the quiet, revolutionary world of fermentation. Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the deep, dark, and often downright desperate world of ancient survival. Imagine, if you will, a time when the grocery store shelves were bare, and Amazon Prime wasn't just slow, it was a concept that didn't exist. You're standing in a parched field, your stomach rumbling like a distant thunderstorm, and the only thing growing is despair. The scent of dust fills your nostrils, the sun beats down relentlessly, and every shadow seems to mock your hunger. Your lips are cracked, your vision blurs, and the usual comforts of a warm meal are nothing but a faded memory. You wouldn't last 5 minutes. Let's be honest. You'd probably look at a dandelion and think, "Oh, a delicious salad," then promptly get food poisoning. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine, if you will, a time before refrigeration, before preservatives, before even a basic understanding of microbiology. You've gathered a bounty of something, perhaps wild roots, grains, or even a strange fibrous plant only to find it bitter, tough, or worse, capable of making you violently ill. What do you do? Most of us would discard it, but our ancestors, through countless generations of observation and accidental discovery, learned to harness the power of microscopic organisms to break down complex compounds, neutralize toxins, and unlock nutrients. This wasn't just cooking, it was alchemy, turning lead into gold, or in this case, poison into porridge. You find yourself in a brutal landscape, a relentless sun beating down on cracked earth. The crops, once a verdant promise of sustenance, are now withered husks, their brittle stalks whispering a prophecy of famine. Your stomach, a hollow drum, reverberates with each agonizing beat of your heart. You've scavenged every berry, every root, every last morsel that nature might offer, and still, it's not enough. The familiar pangs of hunger have morphed into something far more insidious, a gnawing desperation that blurs the lines between what is food and what is merely matter. This, my friend, is the crucible that forged humanity's most bizarre, yet ingenious, culinary experiments. Think about the cassava plant, also known as manioc or yucca. It's a staple food for hundreds of millions of people worldwide today, particularly in tropical regions. Its starchy roots are incredibly versatile. But here's the catch: raw cassava, especially the bitter varieties, contains cyanogenic glycosides, compounds that can release hydrogen cyanide when consumed. Eating raw bitter cassava can lead to severe illness, paralysis, and even death. Yet ancient peoples across Africa, South America, and Asia learned to process it, turning a deadly tuber into a life-sustaining food. The concept of inedible is a curious one. Isn't it for us, nestled in our modern abundance? It conjures images of spoiled milk, rusty nails, or perhaps a rogue sock accidentally dropped into the pasta pot. But for our ancient ancestors, facing the grim specter of starvation, inedible was a flexible term, often redefined by the sheer urgency of survival. When your body screams for calories, when the very act of standing drains your last reserves of energy, the definition of food expands to encompass anything that might, just might, keep the spark of life flickering. The most common method involved a multi-step process of peeling, grating, soaking, and fermenting. Imagine you've just harvested a basket of these thick, woody roots. You'd peel them, then grate them into a pulp. This pulp would then be soaked in water for several days, sometimes pressed to extract the liquid. During this soaking and pressing, naturally occurring bacteria and fungi would begin the fermentation process. This fermentation, combined with the soaking, helps to break down the cyanogenic glycosides, effectively detoxifying the cassava. The liquid, often discarded, would carry away much of the cyanide. The remaining pulp could then be dried and roasted to make flour, or cooked into a thick, starchy paste. It's a bit like turning a potential chemical weapon into a carbohydrate feast. You might even say it was a route to survival. Consider for a moment the common oak acorn. To us, it's a pleasant autumn decoration, perhaps a crunchy treat for a squirrel. To many ancient cultures, it was a staple food. But here's the kicker: raw acorns are packed with tannins, bitter compounds that make them not only unpalatable, but also difficult to digest and, in large quantities, potentially harmful. Yet, across vast swathes of the globe, from Native American tribes in California to Stone Age communities in Europe, people learned to process acorns, leaching out the tannins through elaborate washing and grinding techniques. Imagine the trial and error involved. Someone, somewhere, had to be brave or desperate enough to try eating a bitter, belly-aching acorn, then intelligent enough to figure out that water, time, and patience could turn it into something edible. It wasn't a quick fix. It was a testament to human ingenuity born from necessity. This wasn't a quick fix, mind you. It required patience, knowledge of the specific plant, and an understanding of the subtle signs that the fermentation was proceeding correctly. A wrong step, too short a soak, or improper drying, and you could still end up with a toxic meal. The stakes were incredibly high. This wasn't a casual endeavor. Mind you, we're talking about extensive labor. You'd gather bushels of acorns, often lugging them long distances. Then came the meticulous task of cracking each one, extracting the meat, and then the crucial leaching process. This might involve placing the shelled acorns in a woven basket and submerging it in a flowing stream for days, or repeatedly boiling and draining them. The water, a murky brown, would slowly carry away the bitterness, leaving behind a bland but nutritious starch. Then you'd grind them into flour, which could be baked into a sort of bread or mixed into a porridge. It's a lot of work for what amounts to a pretty bland meal. But when you're staring down famine, bland is a gourmet experience. One common historical truth is that fermentation techniques were independently developed by numerous ancient cultures across the globe, not just for detoxification, but also for preservation and flavor enhancement. From the earliest forms of alcoholic beverages to fermented grains, vegetables, and even meats. Fermentation was a cornerstone of ancient food technology, allowing communities to store food for longer periods and make more diverse use of available resources. One of the fascinating aspects of this is the sheer diversity of solutions. While acorns were a common thread, different regions developed their own unique approaches to inedible foods. Think about the cattail plant, for instance. You've probably seen them growing in wetlands, those long, reedy stalks with the distinctive brown, sausage-like tops. Most of us would walk right by, perhaps admiring their marshy beauty. But every single part of a cattail is edible, if you know what you're doing. The roots, or rhizomes, are starchy and can be ground into flour. The young shoots, when boiled, taste a bit like corn. The pollen, collected from the brown heads, is packed with protein and can be used as a flower extender. Even the tough outer leaves can be woven into mats or shelters. It's like nature's own multi-tool, just waiting for someone to unlock its potential. The challenge, of course, was identifying these hidden treasures and figuring out how to prepare them. Consider also the fermentation of grains. While many grains are edible when simply cooked, some or certain parts of them become more digestible and nutritious through fermentation. Think of sourdough bread. The fermentation of flour and water by wild yeasts and lactic acid bacteria breaks down complex starches and proteins, making the nutrients more bioavailable and the bread easier to digest. For ancient peoples, This wasn't just about a tangy flavor, it was about maximizing the nutritional yield from their precious grain stores, especially during times when every calorie counted. The knowledge wasn't just stumbled upon once, it was meticulously observed, tested, and passed down through generations. Imagine a grandmother, her face weathered by countless seasons, patiently showing her grandchildren how to identify the edible parts of a plant, how to test for bitterness, how to prepare it so it wouldn't make them sick. This was the original culinary school, held not in a pristine kitchen, but in the unforgiving embrace of the wild. Imagine a community saving a portion of their meager grain harvest, not to eat immediately, but to ferment. They might grind it, mix it with water, and leave it in a warm place, perhaps in a ceramic pot or a hollowed-out gourd. Over days, the mixture would bubble and transform, developing a sour aroma. This fermented grain could then be cooked into a more nutritious porridge or baked into a dense, long-lasting bread. It was a way of extending the life of their food and ensuring that their bodies could extract the maximum benefit from what little they had. And it wasn't just plants. The animal kingdom, too, offered up its own array of inedible challenges. When the deer vanished and the fish stopped biting, ancient peoples turned their gaze to creatures that we, with our modern sensibilities, would likely shudder at. Think about insects. Now, before you wrinkle your nose, consider the sheer nutritional density of a crunchy grasshopper or a plump grub. They're packed with protein, fats, and essential micronutrients. While in many parts of the world today, entomophagy, the eating of insects, is still a common practice. In the Western world, it's largely fallen out of favor, viewed with a mixture of disgust and novelty. But for ancient hunter-gatherers, a swarm of locusts wasn't a plague. It was a sudden, abundant, and crucially temporary food source that could be gathered in huge quantities and, if preserved correctly, provide sustenance for weeks. A unique or lesser-known detail about ancient fermentation is the use of fermented fish and animal products in cold climates. Not just for preservation, but also to make otherwise indigestible parts more palatable and nutritious. In some Arctic and subarctic communities, for instance, practices like kiviak fermented auk birds in a sealskin or hakarl fermented shark developed. While these are extreme examples, they highlight how fermentation was used to break down tough tissues, neutralize toxins like the urea in shark meat, and create a calorie-dense, storable food source in environments where fresh food was scarce for much of the year. It's like a very, very old, very, very pungent, and very, very effective way of turning a difficult meal into a vital one. You might even say it was a seal of approval for survival. One universal historical truth about famine is that it strips away all pretenses, all social niceties, and reveals the raw, unvarnished instinct for survival. When the belly screams, ethics often take a backseat to existence. People would eat things they once considered taboo, things that would make them gag in normal times. This wasn't about culinary adventurousness, it was about staving off the ultimate silence. The role of fermentation extended beyond just detoxification and digestibility. It also played a crucial role in preservation. By creating an acidic environment, fermentation inhibits the growth of spoilage-causing bacteria, allowing food to be stored for extended periods without refrigeration. This was invaluable during famines, as it meant that any surplus, however small, could be saved for future lean times. Think of sauerkraut or kimchi, ancient forms of preserving vegetables through lactic acid fermentation. These methods allowed communities to store vitamins and minerals through long winters or periods of drought. However, a curious, lesser-known detail from the archaeological record suggests that some of these famine foods eventually became integrated into the regular diet, even when other options were available. It's almost as if the knowledge gained from desperate times proved so effective that it transcended its original purpose, becoming a valued part of the culinary repertoire. Perhaps some of these inedible dishes, once perfected, actually tasted pretty good, or at least provided a welcome diversity of nutrients. The knowledge of fermentation was often deeply intertwined with cultural practices and rituals. The making of fermented beverages, like beer or mead, often had ceremonial significance, but the underlying principles of fermentation were also applied to more mundane, yet vital food preparation. This knowledge was passed down not just as recipes, but as living traditions, embodied in the hands and minds of the community's elders. Historians still debate whether the widespread adoption of specific famine foods was primarily driven by necessity, or if certain indigenous groups held spiritual or cultural beliefs that made them more open to consuming a wider range of organic matter. Was it purely pragmatism? Or was there an element of respecting and utilizing every gift from nature? Even the most challenging ones. It's a chicken and egg scenario that the sands of time have largely obscured. Historians still debate whether the initial discovery of fermentation was a series of accidental observations, a forgotten pot of grain turning sour, but then proving edible, or if there was a more deliberate, albeit empirical, process of experimentation driven by the need to make certain toxic plants safe for consumption. Was it a happy accident that led to widespread adoption, or a focused effort to unlock new food sources? The line between chance and intention in ancient innovation is often blurry. The story of how ancient people survived famine with inedible foods isn't just a tale of grim endurance. It's a profound narrative of human adaptability, a testament to our species' unwavering will to live, to innovate, and to extract life from the most improbable sources. It reminds us that our definition of food is a cultural construct, shaped by abundance and circumstance. When stripped bare, the human body's needs are simple, and its ingenuity in meeting those needs boundless. It's a stark reminder that if you ever find yourself in a survival situation, your best bet might not be the MRE, but the knowledge of what to look for right under your nose, even if it tastes a bit like dirt. You know, like how my grandpa used to say, "Son, when times are tough, even a burnt toast looks like a banquet." Except in this case, the toast might literally be made of bark. You might find yourself contemplating the sheer genius of these ancient microbiologists. Without microscopes, without petri dishes, they intuitively understood how to cultivate and control invisible forces to their benefit. They transformed the very nature of food, unlocking its potential in ways that still benefit us today. The tangy bite of sourdough, the rich depth of aged cheese, the crispness of a pickle, all echo these ancient, desperate acts of survival. You trudge through a parched landscape, each step kicking up a fine, red dust. The sun beats down relentlessly, and the air is thick with the ominous silence of a world gone hungry. The hunger has moved beyond a mere rumble. It's a deep emptiness, a hollowness that resonates in your bones. You look down at your hands, they tremble uncontrollably, and you find yourself staring at the earth. Not a casual glance, but a focused, intense stare, as if the very ground might yield a secret. And for some ancient civilizations, it very much did. Remember that bitter acorn from our earlier chapter, fermentation, could have played a role there too, helping to break down tannins and make the acorn more palatable. The principles were universal, applied to whatever challenging food source presented itself. It's a reminder that human ingenuity, when faced with the ultimate test, finds ways to bend nature to its will, even at the microscopic level. Welcome to the world of geophagy, or earth-eating. Sounds bizarre, even repulsive, doesn't it? For us, nestled in our modern abundance, the thought of eating clay, soil, or even a bit of dirt seems utterly alien. But for ancient people facing the grim reality of famine, the earth wasn't always something to walk on. Sometimes it was a lifeline. As you settle deeper into the quiet, let the subtle hum of ancient fermentation fill your imagination. It's the sound of survival, the quiet work of unseen helpers transforming the impossible into the possible, ensuring that another day would dawn, another meal would be had, and the human story would continue. Imagine yourself in a small village, and perhaps in an arid region of Africa or a remote corner of the Americas. The crops have failed, the water sources have dwindled, and the game animals have long since vanished. Children cry from hunger, and adults are gaunt, their eyes sunken. In this desperate scenario, some would begin to seek out specific types of clay or mineral-rich earth. This wasn't a random act of madness. This was a survival strategy passed down through generations. A secret etched into the collective memory of the survivors. The relentless sun, a fiery orb, glares down on a world that seems to have forgotten the meaning of abundance. Your feet, raw and aching, carry you to the edge of the vast, shimmering expanse of the ocean. The air, once thick with the promise of land-based sustenance, now carries only the briny tang of salt and the mournful cry of gulls, The land has given all it can, and still, your stomach growls with an insatiable hunger. This is the moment when ancient coastal communities, pushed to the very brink of survival, turned their desperate gaze to the depths, discovering that the ocean, in its boundless mystery, held a different kind of bounty, a marine marvel, often unappetizing to our modern palates, but a lifeline in times of famine. One common historical truth is that geophagy has been documented across cultures and continents, from ancient peoples in Africa and the Americas to communities in Asia and Europe. It wasn't an isolated phenomenon, but a widespread human response to scarcity. Archaeological evidence of clay eating has been found in various sites, suggesting it's a practice that spans millennia. Imagine standing on a rocky shore, the waves crashing against the cliffs, their rhythm a hypnotic, yet unsettling beat. You fished the shallow waters, collected every accessible shellfish, but the familiar sources are depleted. The hunger is a cold, sharp claw in your gut, and despair threatens to overwhelm you. But then your eyes, sharpened by desperation, begin to see potential where others might see only alien forms. The ocean, a vast, unexplored larder, held creatures that, while strange, offered a chance at another day. But why earth certain clays, particularly specific types like kaolinite or montmorillonite, can contain essential trace minerals such as iron, zinc, and calcium. During times of food scarcity, when diets were severely deficient, these minerals could help combat malnutrition and deficiency-related illnesses. Furthermore, clay could act as an adsorbent, binding to toxins or pathogens in the digestive tract. This was especially crucial when people were forced to consume poor quality, contaminated, or mildly toxic foods. Think of it as a natural antacid and mineral supplement, all in one. Of course, not just any dirt would do. You couldn't just go out and eat a handful of garden soil. It was a very specific, knowledgeable selection. Let's dive into the world of seaweed and kelp. To us, it's often a nuisance tangled around our feet at the beach, or perhaps a trendy superfood in a health store. But for ancient coastal peoples, these underwater forests were a readily available, often abundant, and surprisingly nutritious food source, especially when land-based crops failed. Seaweeds are packed with vitamins, minerals, and even some protein, making them a vital supplement to a deficient diet. Picture yourself observing an elder woman, her hands trembling, carefully scraping layers of white clay from a particular mound. She doesn't just eat it immediately. She might mix it with water, forming a thick slurry, or even mold it into small pellets and dry them in the sun. Sometimes the clay would be lightly roasted to make it more palatable or to kill any harmful microbes. This entire process was a ritual, a blend of traditional knowledge and sheer desperation. You might see the children, wide-eyed, watching the adults, learning these vital lessons of survival. Imagine wading into the chilly waters, your hands reaching down to grasp the slippery fronds of kelp or the delicate blades of seaweed. You'd pull them from the rocks, gathering armfuls of the slimy, green, brown, or red strands. They could be eaten fresh, their salty, slightly chewy texture providing an immediate, if unusual, form of sustenance. More often, they would be dried in the sun, laid out on rocks or hung on lines, transforming into brittle, shelf-stable sheets that could be stored for months. This dried seaweed could then be rehydrated and added to stews, or simply chewed as a tough, salty snack. It's like nature's own vitamin tablet, but with a lot more ocean flavor. You might even say it was the secret to survival. You might be wondering, how did ancient people know which earths were safe to eat? This isn't an easy question to answer. There was undoubtedly a great deal of trial and error, and no doubt, many instances of illness and even death from consuming the wrong kind of earth. But over generations, knowledge accumulated. The visual characteristics of the clay color, texture, the taste not too bitter, not too salty, and even the feel of it when touched would become crucial indicators. The elders of the tribe would be the bearers of this knowledge, passing it down to the younger generations. It was like a treasure map, but the treasure wasn't gold. It was life. The sheer variety of edible seaweeds meant that different communities developed knowledge of their local species. Some were more palatable than others. Some required specific preparation to reduce bitterness or improve digestibility. This wasn't a casual foraging trip. It was a deep understanding of the marine ecosystem. Think about the incredible resilience of the human spirit. When all else failed, when conventional food supplies ran out, we turned to the very earth itself for sustenance. It's a reminder that the human body is an incredible machine, capable of adapting to the most extreme conditions. And the human mind, when pushed to its limits, can devise astonishing solutions. You might see a young mother, clutching her hungry child, breaking off a piece of dried clay and carefully offering it to the infant's mouth, an act both desperate and full of hope. One common historical truth is that seaweed consumption has a long and rich history in many coastal cultures, particularly in East Asia, Japan, Korea, China, and parts of Northern Europe, Ireland, Scotland. While often a regular part of the diet, its importance surged during periods of famine, providing essential nutrients when other food sources were scarce. Archaeological evidence from coastal settlements often includes remnants of various marine algae, indicating their consistent use. Historians still debate whether the practice of geophagy was a purely conscious and purposeful response to nutritional deficiencies, or if it was simply an instinctive behavior arising from extreme hunger, with the nutritional benefits being a fortunate side effect. Did ancient people understand trace minerals? Or did they simply observe that consuming certain earths made them feel better or alleviated the pangs of hunger? Perhaps it was a combination of both, with empirical understanding leading to deliberate adoption. Beyond the plant-like forms, the ocean also offered a bizarre array of invertebrates that would make most modern diners blanch. Think of sea cucumbers, sea urchins, jellyfish, and even certain types of marine worms. These creatures, often found clinging to rocks, buried in the sand, or floating in the water, were a last resort, but a valuable one. You might feel a slight queasiness at the thought of eating dirt, but put yourself in their shoes when death is lurking, when every day is a struggle for existence. What we consider normal gets turned on its head. The thought of a warm, nutritious meal would become a distant dream, and the grim reality of nibbling on clay would become a necessity. Consider the sea cucumber. These strange, leathery, sausage-shaped creatures that crawl along the seafloor might not look appetizing, but they are rich in protein and other nutrients. Ancient foragers would collect them from tide pools or shallow waters. Their preparation often involved extensive cleaning, boiling, and then drying, which would turn them into a hard, almost woody substance that could be stored. When needed, they would be rehydrated and cooked. It's like turning a rubber hose into a meal, but with more nutritional value. And it wasn't just clay, sometimes it was other mineral-rich earths, or even ash from fire pits. Ash, while not food in the traditional sense, could provide some minerals, particularly potassium. In some cases, it might have been used to process other foods, helping to remove toxins or make them more digestible. This is another example of humans utilizing everything available in their environment. Or what about jellyfish? While most are venomous, some species, particularly in Asian waters, are edible after extensive processing to remove their stinging cells and break down their gelatinous structure. Ancient coastal communities in these regions learned to salt and press jellyfish, transforming them into a crunchy, translucent food that could provide some protein and hydration. It's a truly unique example of turning a seemingly impossible food source into something that could sustain life. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen story we talked about? Just like using crocodile dung for skin protection, geophagy is another instance of humans using what's available, no matter how alien it seems, to solve a fundamental survival problem. It shows the incredible plasticity of the human mind when faced with insurmountable challenges. A unique or lesser-known detail in the realm of marine famine foods is the consumption of barnacles by ancient peoples. Not just the small, common ones, but large, gooseneck barnacles that cling to rocks in intertidal zones. While difficult to harvest and often requiring tools to pry them off, these filter-feeding crustaceans could grow quite large and offered a surprisingly rich source of protein and fat. Imagine clinging to slippery rocks, waves crashing around you, meticulously prying off these tough, armored creatures, knowing that each one represented a vital mouthful. It's like trying to eat a rock that's decided to grow a shell and some legs. But it's worth it for the calories. You might feel a strange connection to these ancient people. Even though their world was vastly different from ours, their struggle to survive, their resilience in the face of adversity, is something we can still relate to. They found life in the most unlikely of places, and in doing so, They wrote an incredible chapter in the story of human survival. The collection of these marine marvels required intimate knowledge of the tides, the currents, and the specific habitats of each creature. You'd learn to read the ocean, understanding when and where to find the most abundant harvests. You'd develop specialized tools, perhaps sharpened sticks for digging, or woven baskets for collecting to maximize your yield from this often treacherous environment. As you close your eyes, imagine the smell of damp earth after a rain. But instead of seeing it as the scent of new life, think of it as the smell of a life-saving meal. It's a chilling thought, but also a powerful reminder of our ancestors' tenacity. The risks were ever present. Rogue waves, sharp rocks, venomous creatures, and the sheer physical exertion of foraging in a marine environment all posed dangers. And of course, misidentifying an edible species from a toxic one could be fatal. The knowledge passed down through generations wasn't just about what to eat, but how to safely acquire it. The sun, a relentless eye in the sky, beats down on your weary form. Your throat is parched, your lips cracked, and the familiar ache in your stomach has deepened into a dull, persistent throb. The landscape around you offers little comfort. Trees stand like skeletal sentinels. Their leaves sparse, their branches brittle. The ground is hard, unforgiving, and the usual bounty of berries and tender shoots is a distant memory. This is the moment when your ancestors, pushed to the brink, turned their gaze from the obvious to the obscure, from the fruit to the very framework of the plant itself. You are about to discover the hidden sustenance within bark, roots, and lichen. Historians still debate whether the reliance on certain famine marine foods, such as specific types of sea urchins or less common shellfish, was a direct result of overfishing more desirable species, or if these foods were always part of a broader, opportunistic foraging strategy that simply became more critical during times of scarcity. Was it a sign of ecological pressure, or just a testament to a deep, holistic understanding of the marine larder? The archaeological record can sometimes tell us what was eaten, but not always the precise motivations behind it. Imagine the sheer desperation that would drive you to consider peeling the bark from a tree. Not for shelter or fire, but for food. Yet, for countless generations, across diverse cultures and climates, the inner bark, or phloem, of various trees became a vital, albeit unpalatable, source of calories during times of extreme scarcity. This wasn't a choice made lightly, it was a desperate gamble against starvation. You might find yourself contemplating the sheer vastness of the ocean and the incredible adaptability of humanity to extract sustenance from its depths. When the land offered nothing, the sea, in its endless generosity, still provided. It's a powerful reminder that our ancestors were not just hunters and gatherers, they were also skilled marine foragers, understanding the rhythms of the tides and the secrets of the deep. Think of the mighty pine. To us, it's timber, resin, the scent of a Christmas tree. To a starving ancient person, it held a secret. The outer bark, rough and protective, was useless, but beneath it, a thin, moist layer, the phloem carried sugars and nutrients from the needles down to the roots. This layer, often pale and slightly sticky, could be scraped off, dried, and then ground into a coarse flour. This bark bread, as it was sometimes called, was far from delicious. It was fibrous, bitter, and difficult to digest, but it offered calories, a precious commodity when every other food source had vanished. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, or the bark bread? Just as those seemingly unappetizing things held utility, so too did the strange creatures and plants of the ocean. They weren't gourmet meals, but they were life itself. They were the difference between succumbing to hunger and living to see another sunrise. It's a testament to the human spirit's unwavering will to survive, to find a way, any way, to continue existing. Even if that way involves eating something that looks like it belongs in an alien aquarium. The process was arduous, and you'd need a sharp tool, perhaps a stone blade or a bone scraper, to carefully peel away the tough outer bark without damaging the delicate inner layer. Then you'd meticulously scrape the phloem, collecting it in a basket or on a large leaf. Once gathered, it couldn't be eaten fresh in any significant quantity. It needed to be dried, often in the sun or over a low fire, to prevent spoilage and to make it brittle enough for grinding. Finally, it would be pounded or ground into a powder. which could then be mixed with water to form a gruel or baked into flat. Hard cakes. This wasn't a meal to savor, it was a meal to survive. The sun, now a distant memory, has given way to a moonless night, the darkness pressing in like a heavy blanket. Your hunger, a familiar, unwelcome guest, has settled deep in your bones, a constant reminder of the scarcity that defines your existence. You've scoured the land, peeled the bark, gnawed on bones, embraced the micro-feast of insects, and even dared to plumb the ocean's strange depths. Yet, you know there are plants, roots, and even some animals out there that hold the promise of sustenance, but also the threat of death. This is the ultimate test of ancient ingenuity, the painstaking, often perilous, art of processing the dangerous, of turning the deadly into the digestible. One common historical truth is that bark consumption was a widespread practice during famines, particularly in northern latitudes where other food sources were scarce during harsh winters or crop failures. Scandinavian and Finnish peoples, for example Famine, have extensive historical records and even archaeological evidence of pettu or pettuleipä, bark bread being made from pine and birch bark, during the great famines of the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. This wasn't just ancient history, it was a relatively recent, grim reality for many. Imagine holding a seemingly innocent root in your hand, perhaps one you've just dug from the earth. It looks like food, feels like food, but a whisper from your ancestors, a memory of agonizing pain or swift demise, warns you that this particular root, if consumed raw, could be your last meal. This is the high-stakes world of detoxification, where knowledge, patience, and precise technique are the only things standing between you and oblivion. It's like being a chef, but if one wrong ingredient meant instant, agonizing death, you might even say it put the danger in dinner. Moving beneath the earth, you encounter the silent, hidden world of roots. While some roots, like wild carrots or turnips, are obvious food sources, many others are tough, fibrous, or even toxic in their raw state. Yet, ancient foragers developed an encyclopedic knowledge of which roots could be processed to yield sustenance. Consider the humble fern. Many species of fern have edible rhizomes, underground stems, or fiddleheads young, coiled fronds. But some are bitter, and others contain compounds that can interfere with nutrient absorption if not properly prepared. Let's consider the cycad palm. Found in tropical and subtropical regions, these ancient plants produce large, starchy seeds or nuts. They look appealing, almost like giant acorns. But here's the deadly secret: cycad seeds contain neurotoxins, specifically psychosin, which can cause severe neurological damage, liver failure, and even death if consumed without proper preparation. Yet, indigenous peoples in Australia, parts of Asia, and the Pacific Islands have consumed cycad seeds for thousands of years. The bracken fir nuts, for instance, is found globally and its rhizomes are starchy. However, they contain thiaminase, an enzyme that destroys thiamine vitamin B1 and other potential carcinogens. Despite this, various indigenous groups, including some Native American tribes and Maori people in New Zealand, consumed bracken rhizomes after extensive processing, roasting, pounding, and leaching. This wasn't just about finding food, it was about understanding complex chemistry through generations of empirical observation. You dig deep, often with nothing more than a sharpened stick, to extract these fibrous lifelines. Then came the laborious task of cleaning, peeling, and preparing them, often involving long hours of boiling or roasting. The detoxification process for cycad seeds was incredibly elaborate and time-consuming, a testament to the extreme lengths people would go to survive. Imagine you've gathered these large, heavy seeds. First, you'd crack them open and remove the kernel. Then, these kernels would often be sliced or pounded into a pulp to increase their surface area. The crucial step involved leaching, repeatedly soaking the pulp in running water, often for several days or even weeks, to wash away the water-soluble toxins. This might involve placing the pulp in woven bags submerged in streams, or regularly changing water in large basins. The water would turn yellow or brown as the toxins leached out. After extensive leaching, the pulp would be dried, sometimes fermented as we discussed in Chapter 6, and then ground into a flour that could be baked or cooked. It's a bit like trying to make a delicious cake out of a highly poisonous mushroom. and actually succeeding. A unique or lesser-known detail in the realm of roots is the use of water lily rhizomes. While we might admire water lilies for their beautiful flowers, their thick, starchy rhizomes, buried deep in the muddy bottoms of ponds and slow-moving rivers, were a significant food source for some ancient peoples, particularly in parts of Asia and North America. These rhizomes, often resembling large, elongated potatoes, could be harvested by wading into the water and digging them up from the mud. They were then peeled, boiled, or roasted, providing a surprisingly nutritious and relatively palatable food source that was often overlooked by predators and competitors. It's like finding a hidden treasure chest at the bottom of a murky pond. This wasn't a casual affair, and thus it required a deep understanding of the plant, the environment, and the precise timing. Too short a soak, and the toxins remained. Too long, and valuable nutrients might be lost. It was a delicate balance, a dance with death performed by every generation. And then there's lichen. You know, those strange, crusty, leafy, or bushy growths that cling to rocks and tree trunks, often mistaken for moss. Lichens are fascinating composite organisms, a symbiotic partnership between a fungus and an alga, or cyanobacterium. They are incredibly hardy, growing in some of the most extreme environments on Earth, from Arctic tundras to scorching deserts. And during times of extreme hunger, they became food. One common historical truth is that the development of sophisticated processing techniques to detoxify naturally poisonous plants was a major evolutionary advantage for early humans, allowing them to expand their dietary repertoire and survive in environments where readily edible food was scarce. This knowledge was often highly localized and specific to particular plant species and geographical regions. Many lichens, like rock tripe, various Umbilicaria species, or Iceland moss, Citraria islandica, are technically edible, but they are far from appetizing. They are often bitter, tough, and contain complex carbohydrates that are difficult for humans to digest. To make them palatable and digestible, ancient people employed methods like boiling them repeatedly, changing the water each time, or even soaking them in ash water alkaline solutions to break down the bitter compounds and make the starches more accessible. Imagine the sheer determination required to turn a piece of leathery, bitter rock growth into something that could sustain life. It's like trying to make a meal out of a piece of old leather, but with less flavor. Beyond leaching, ancient people employed other methods. Heat treatment, for instance, was crucial for many plants. Boiling, roasting, or baking could break down certain toxins or make indigestible compounds more accessible. Think of wild potatoes or yams. While some varieties are perfectly safe, others contain solanine or other toxic glycoalkaloids that can cause nausea, vomiting, and neurological issues. Roasting or boiling these tubers at high temperatures could often reduce the toxin levels to a safe range. This wasn't just about cooking, it was about chemical transformation. The sheer volume of lichen required to provide meaningful calories was immense. You'd spend hours, days even, painstakingly scraping these growths from rocks and trees, your fingers aching, your stomach rumbling. Then the long, slow process of preparation, waiting for the bitterness to leach out, hoping that this meager offering would be enough to keep you going for another day. It was a test of patience as much as it was a test of survival. Another powerful tool was the use of alkaline substances. As we touched upon with fermentation, adding ash, which contains potassium carbonate or lime calcium hydroxide to certain foods, could help break down complex carbohydrates or neutralize toxins. The most famous example of this is nixtamalization of corn maize. While corn itself isn't toxic, nixtamalization, soaking and cooking corn in an alkaline solution, usually lime water, significantly increases its nutritional value by making niacin, vitamin B3 bioavailable and improving the balance of amino acids. Without nixtamalization, populations heavily reliant on corn can develop pellagra, a severe deficiency disease. Ancient Mesoamerican civilizations discovered this process millennia ago. Transforming corn from a good food source into a dietary cornerstone, historians still debate whether the extensive knowledge of processing toxic or unpalatable plants, including specific barks and roots, was developed through systematic experimentation or through a more serendipitous process of observing animals consuming these plants without ill effect. Was it a deliberate scientific inquiry, or a desperate imitation of wildlife, followed by refinement? The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a blend of observation, imitation, and painstaking trial and error over countless generations. Imagine the trial and error involved. Someone, somewhere, must have accidentally dropped some wood ash into a pot of boiling corn, or noticed that corn cooked in naturally alkaline water tasted better and led to fewer illnesses. This accidental discovery, refined over centuries, became a vital part of their survival strategy. It's like discovering that adding a bit of baking soda to your water makes your vegetables taste better and stops you from getting sick. The lessons learned from these last resort foods were profound. They taught ancient peoples about the subtle chemistry of their environment, the hidden potential within seemingly inert matter, and the importance of meticulous preparation. It forged a deep connection to the land, an understanding that every part of nature, that even the most challenging, could potentially offer a lifeline. A unique or lesser-known detail is the ancient practice of using clay or charcoal to mitigate the effects of consuming mildly toxic or difficult-to-digest foods. While not a detoxification process in itself, some ancient communities would consume specific types of edible clay, as discussed in Chapter 2, or even activated charcoal from specific types of burnt wood alongside their meals. The idea was that these substances would act as adsorbents in the digestive tract, binding to toxins and preventing their absorption into the body. It's like having a natural filter system for your stomach, a kind of ancient Brita filter for your insides. You might even say it was a gut feeling for survival. You might recall that crocodile dung sunscreen from our first chapter. Just as that seemingly repulsive substance held a hidden utility, so too did the bark, roots, and lichens. They were not pleasant, not desirable, but they were available, and they offered a sliver of hope when all other options had vanished. It's a testament to the human spirit's refusal to surrender, to find a way, any way, to continue existing. The knowledge of these processing techniques was not universal. It was highly specialized, often guarded within families or specific community roles. The poison experts or food alchemists were invaluable members of the tribe. Their wisdom literally the difference between life and death. They understood the subtle signs, the change in color of the leaching water, the specific smell of a fermenting batch, the exact texture indicating a root was safe to eat. As you drift deeper into this story, consider the sheer determination of those who came before us. They didn't have cookbooks or nutritional guides. They had observation, memory, and the burning desire to see another sunrise. They ate the earth, they stripped the trees, they scraped the rocks, all to keep the flame of humanity alive. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? That the very fabric of our existence, the continuation of our species, was built upon such desperate and ingenious acts of survival. The risks were immense. A single mistake could lead to agonizing pain, paralysis, or death. Children would be taught from a young age, often through direct observation and participation, the critical importance of these steps. There was no room for error, no second chances when dealing with nature's hidden dangers. The wind howls, a mournful dirge across the desolate plains. Your stomach cramps, a hollow echo of the emptiness within. You've scoured the earth, stripped the trees, even considered nibbling on a particularly stubborn lichen. But the plant kingdom has yielded its last secrets. Now, your eyes turn to a different kind of bounty, one that, in times of plenty, you might have discarded without a second thought. The scent of a distant, decaying carcass, carried on the wind, is no longer a warning. It's a tantalizing whisper of survival. This is where ancient ingenuity, driven by the stark reality of famine, transformed the seemingly inedible parts of animals into life-sustaining nourishment. Historians still debate whether the development of these complex detoxification methods was primarily driven by the need to expand food sources during periods of population growth and resource pressure, or if it was a more gradual accumulation of knowledge over tens of thousands of years, with each generation adding to the empirical understanding of their environment. Was it a sudden innovation born of crisis, or a slow, meticulous evolution of culinary science? The answer likely varies depending on the specific food and culture in question. When hunger gnaws at your very being, the concept of waste becomes a luxury you simply cannot afford. Every sinew, every drop, every fragment of an animal that once breathed becomes a potential calorie, a vital nutrient. We're talking about a level of utilization that would make modern butchers faint. This isn't about prime cuts or tenderloins. It's about the grim, resourceful art of extracting life from what remains. You might find yourself contemplating the sheer courage and intellect required to experiment with potentially deadly substances. These were not scientists in lab coats, but desperate people learning through observation, memory, and the grim lessons of failure. They pushed the boundaries of what was possible, transforming the very landscape of their diet. Let's begin with blood. To many modern sensibilities, consuming blood raw or as a primary food source might seem barbaric, perhaps even a scene from a horror movie. But for nomadic pastoralists and hunter-gatherers, particularly in arid or semi-arid regions, blood was a liquid lifeline. Think of the Maasai people of East Africa, for whom a mixture of cattle blood and milk is a traditional and highly nutritious drink. This wasn't just a ritual, it was a practical solution to protein and iron deficiency in environments where other food sources were scarce. Remember that tough, fibrous bark from Chapter 3? Even that sometimes required specific processing, like prolonged boiling or pounding, to make it more digestible. The theme of transformation runs through all these survival strategies. It's a testament to the human spirit's unwavering will to survive, to find a way, any way, to continue existing, even if that way involves turning a potential killer into a meal. They didn't just survive, they mastered their environment, bending its dangers to their will, ensuring that another day would dawn. Imagine you're a member of such a tribe. A prized animal, perhaps a reindeer or a camel, is carefully bled, often without killing it, allowing it to continue providing milk or labor. The blood, rich in protein, iron, and other vital nutrients, would be collected in gourds or bowls. It might be consumed fresh, still warm, a potent metallic-tasting elixir that instantly staves off the weakness of hunger. Or it could be mixed with milk, creating a thick, fortifying beverage. Sometimes it was even cooked, perhaps thickened with grains or herbs, forming a kind of blood pudding or sausage. This wasn't a casual snack, it was a deliberate act of sustenance, a way to keep the body functioning when other foods were unavailable. It's like the ultimate protein shake, but with a much more robust flavor profile. You might even say it puts the iron in iron deficiency. The chill of the pre-dawn air bites at your exposed skin. A stark reminder of the long, cold night. Your hunger, a dull ache that has become a constant companion, seems to amplify the silence around you. You've mastered the art of extracting sustenance from the most improbable sources, from the earth itself to the depths of the ocean, from the smallest insect to the toughest hide. But as you look around at the faces of your community, you begin to notice a subtle, yet profound difference in how the famine is affecting everyone. This is the grim reality of social stratification of hunger, where the desperate measures of survival varied dramatically across different societal tiers. And the inedible often became the sole domain of the most vulnerable. The collection of blood required skill and respect for the animal. It wasn't about wanton slaughter, but about sustainable harvesting, ensuring the animal's continued health. This delicate balance between immediate need and long-term survival was a hallmark of ancient wisdom. Imagine a society, perhaps an ancient city-state or a sprawling agricultural empire, suddenly gripped by famine. While the entire population suffers, the suffering is far from equal. The wealthy, the powerful, the elite, they have reserves, they have granaries, trade networks, and often the means to coerce or control what little food remains. You, on the other hand, are likely among the common folk, the laborers, the farmers, whose very existence is tied to the land's bounty. When that bounty fails, you are the first to feel the true, unvarnished terror of starvation. Next, consider the seemingly impenetrable fortress of bones. To us, a bone is something you throw to a dog, or perhaps a decorative item for a Halloween costume. To a starving ancient person, a bone was a treasure chest of hidden nutrients. The most obvious prize was the marrow, a fatty, calorie-dense substance found within the hollow cavities of long bones. Marrow is incredibly rich in fats, which are crucial for energy and warmth, especially in cold climates. Consider the stark contrast. While you, with your hard-won knowledge, are out scraping lichen from rocks or boiling tough bark, The ruling class might still be consuming their dwindling stores of grain, perhaps even importing food from distant, unaffected regions, albeit at exorbitant prices. Their famine foods might be a reduction in variety, a smaller portion of their usual fare. Your famine foods are literally the things they would never even consider putting near their mouths. It's like the difference between a slightly inconvenient diet and a desperate struggle for every single calorie. You might even say that for some, famine was a diet plan, while for others, it was a death sentence. Extracting marrow wasn't always easy. You'd need to crack the bone open, often with another stone or a heavy club. The marrow, once exposed, could be scooped out and eaten raw, a soft, rich, almost buttery substance, or it could be boiled with other scraps to create a nourishing broth, the fats rendering out and floating to the surface. This bone broth, simmered for hours, would extract not just the marrow, but also collagen, gelatin, and a host of minerals from the bone itself, creating a surprisingly potent and digestible liquid. It's the original superfood, long before kale became a thing. This wasn't just about who had more food, it was about who had access to the knowledge and resources to process the truly inedible. The elaborate techniques for detoxifying cycad seeds, for leaching tannins from acorns, or for fermenting cassava, these were often labor-intensive processes. They required time, water, specific tools, and a secure place to perform them. If you were a landless peasant, constantly on the move, or enslaved, you might not have had the luxury of setting up a multi-day leaching operation. Your options were far more limited, often reduced to the most immediate, least processed, and therefore most dangerous famine foods. Beyond marrow, ancient peoples found ways to utilize the bone itself. In extreme cases, bones could be pounded into a fine powder, then mixed with water or other meager ingredients to form a kind of gritty, mineral-rich gruel. This was truly a last resort, as the nutritional value from the bone matrix itself was limited, but it provided bulk and some minerals. One common historical truth is that the intensive processing of animal bones for marrow and grease was a widespread practice among Stone Age hunter-gatherers, particularly in environments where large game animals were a primary food source. Archaeological sites frequently yield evidence of systematically broken long bones, indicating deliberate marrow extraction. One common historical truth is that famines throughout history have almost invariably exacerbated existing social inequalities, disproportionately affecting the poor, the marginalized, and those without political power or land ownership. The wealthy could often hoard resources, buy food at inflated prices, or simply migrate to areas with more food, leaving the most vulnerable to face the brunt of starvation. This pattern is visible across diverse civilizations, from ancient Egypt to medieval Europe and beyond. Now, for something truly challenging hide and skin, we use animal hides for clothing, shelter, and tools, but eating them, that sounds like chewing on your winter coat. Yet, when faced with starvation, ancient peoples found ways to render even tough, fibrous animal skins digestible. This wasn't a simple matter of boiling. Raw hide is mostly collagen, a protein that is incredibly tough and difficult for human enzymes to break down. Think about the distribution of wild resources. While a forest might contain edible roots, or a river might hold fish, access to these resources was often controlled by landowners or powerful clans. If you were a serf tied to the land, or a member of a lower caste, you might be forbidden from foraging in certain areas, or your access might be severely restricted. This meant that even natural famine foods were not equally available to everyone. You might see a desperate family risking severe punishment, sneaking onto a lord's land at night to dig for roots, knowing that a single mistake could mean a beating. Or worse, the process often involved extensive boiling, sometimes for days, to break down the collagen into gelatin. Imagine a large pot, perhaps a hollowed-out log or a clay vessel, constantly simmering over a fire, filled with strips of animal hide. The smell would be distinctive. The resulting gelatinous mass, while not appetizing, offered protein and some calories. In some cases, the hide might have been scraped, roasted, and then pounded to make it more palatable. It's like turning leather into a very, very chewy, unflavored gummy bear. You might even say it was a tough meal to swallow, literally. The very act of consuming inedible foods could also carry a social stigma. While the wealthy might suffer from reduced rations, they would rarely be seen consuming bark bread or boiled insects. These were the foods of the truly desperate, a visible marker of one's low status and extreme suffering. It was a humiliation added to the agony of hunger. You might even find yourself hiding your meager, unappetizing meal from the gaze of others, ashamed of the lengths you had to go to survive. A unique or lesser-known detail is the consumption of fish skin and scales. While we might eat fish skin today if it's crispy and delicious, ancient coastal communities facing famine would meticulously collect and process fish scales. These scales, often discarded, contain small amounts of protein and minerals. They would be boiled for extended periods, sometimes with other fish parts, to soften them and extract any remaining nutrients. It's not exactly a gourmet experience, but when your alternative is starvation, a bowl of boiled fish scales starts to look pretty appealing. It's a reminder that every part of the catch counted, down to the very last flake. A unique or lesser-known detail in the context of famine and social stratification is the phenomenon of famine foods becoming a form of currency or tribute. In some ancient societies, particularly those with strong hierarchical structures, the most difficult to process or least desirable famine foods might be demanded as tribute from lower classes to the ruling elite, even if the elite themselves didn't consume them. This served to further strip the poor of any potential sustenance, while allowing the powerful to demonstrate their control over all resources, even the most marginal. It's like being forced to pay taxes in dirt and bark, while the king feasts on the last of the stored grain. Beyond the obvious, ancient people also utilized organs and glands that we might consider awful or simply discard today. Think about the eyes of an animal, the brain, the lungs, even certain glands. These parts, often rich in specific vitamins and minerals that might be lacking in muscle meat, were consumed to ensure a more complete nutritional profile. The brain, for instance, is incredibly rich in fats and certain B vitamins. The liver is a powerhouse of iron and vitamin A. Nothing was wasted. It was a holistic approach to consumption, born out of necessity. The impact of famine on different social classes wasn't just about immediate consumption, it was about long-term survival and recovery. The wealthy, with their reserves and connections, could recover more quickly once the famine passed. They could replant their fields, restock their herds, and rebuild their fortunes. For the poor, however, the damage was often irreversible. Many would die or be left permanently weakened, susceptible to disease, and unable to work their land. Children born during famine often suffered from stunting and cognitive impairments, a legacy of hunger that could last generations. The gap between the rich and the poor would widen, becoming a chasm. The ingenuity extended to the processing techniques. Beyond simple boiling, ancient cultures developed methods like rendering fat from bones and other fatty tissues. This rendered fat, or tallow, was a crucial energy source that could be stored for long periods, providing vital calories during lean times. It could be eaten plain, mixed with dried meat, or used to preserve other foods. Consider the role of knowledge itself. While we've talked about the incredible knowledge ancient peoples had about processing dangerous foods, this knowledge wasn't always equally distributed. In some societies, specialized knowledge, particularly about medicinal plants or complex food processing, might have been held by specific families, shamans, or privileged groups. If you were an outsider, nor simply not part of that inner circle, you might not have access to the life-saving information. This created another layer of vulnerability for those at the bottom of the social ladder. Then there's the question of how this knowledge was passed down. It wasn't written in books. It was demonstrated, practiced, and absorbed through generations. Children would learn by watching their elders, by participating in the arduous processes of preparation. The techniques were often specific to the animal, the environment, and the tools available. The desperation of the lower classes during famine could also lead to social unrest, rebellions, and mass migrations. When people are starving, they will do anything to survive, and that often includes challenging the established order. The bread riots of history are a testament to this, where the hungry masses pushed beyond endurance would rise up against those who hoarded food or failed to provide for them. Historians still debate whether the extensive use of animal blood, bones, and hides was a universal response to famine across all ancient cultures. or if certain environmental factors and cultural taboos led to regional variations in which inedible animal parts were prioritized for consumption. Did some cultures have a greater aversion to blood? For example, even in times of extreme hunger, due to spiritual beliefs? Or was it simply a matter of what was most readily available and easiest to process in their specific environment? It's a complex interplay of pragmatism and cultural norms. Historians still debate whether the social stratification of famine was an inevitable consequence of existing hierarchical structures, or if certain ancient rulers and governing bodies made conscious choices that worsened the plight of the lower classes, perhaps to maintain power or to prioritize the survival of the elite. Was it simply a natural outcome of resource scarcity? Or was there an element of deliberate policy that deepened the suffering of the poor? The answers often lie in interpreting the sparse records and archaeological evidence of ancient economic and political systems. You might find yourself marveling at the sheer tenacity. Imagine the smell of boiling hide, the metallic tang of fresh blood, the gritty texture of bone meal. These weren't pleasant culinary experiences. They were acts of defiance against death, a testament to the human will to endure. It's like trying to make a 5-star meal out of a shoe, a rusty nail, and a glass of water, and actually succeeding in keeping yourself alive. You might find yourself feeling a deep sense of injustice. To have survived the elements, to have mastered the art of eating the inedible, only to be denied even that meager sustenance by the structures of your own society, it's a bitter pill to swallow. Far more bitter than any leached acorn. It's a reminder that human suffering is not always a natural phenomenon. It is often a product of human systems. The lessons from these ancient survivalists are clear when your life is on the line. The definition of food becomes incredibly broad. It pushes the boundaries of what we consider edible, forcing us to look beyond our modern comforts and appreciate the raw, powerful instinct for survival. They didn't just survive, they thrived, in a grim sort of way, by understanding that every part of life, no matter how unappetizing, could offer a chance at another day. Remember the geophagy we discussed in Chapter 2? While some cultures consumed clay as a medicinal or even cultural practice, for the truly impoverished during famine, it might have been their only option, a desperate attempt to fill their stomachs with anything, regardless of its nutritional value or long-term effects. The context of consumption often reveals the true depth of desperation. The sun dips below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across a landscape that offers no comfort. Your hunger, a constant companion, whispers promises of anything at all, that might fill the void. You've exhausted the obvious, the less obvious, and even the truly desperate options from the plant and animal kingdoms. But as twilight deepens, a different world awakens. A world teeming with life that scurries, crawls, and sprouts in the most unexpected places. This is the realm of the tiny, the overlooked, the often feared insects and fungi which, for ancient peoples facing famine, became an unexpected, vital microfeast. As you reflect on this grim aspect of ancient survival, let the quiet understanding settle within you. The fight against famine was not just a battle against nature, it was often a battle against the very fabric of society itself. The strong survived, the weak perished, and the lines of class and power were etched even deeper by the cruel hand of hunger. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? That even when facing the ultimate equalizer of starvation, humanity found ways to create inequality. Imagine yourself, weary and famished, sifting through decaying logs or peering under rocks. Your modern sensibilities might recoil at the thought, but your ancient self, driven by the primal urge to survive, sees not creep crawlies, but protein, not strange growths, but carbohydrates. This is the moment when the definition of food shrinks to the size of a beetle or expands to encompass a mushroom cap. The first faint blush of dawn paints the eastern sky, a gentle promise after the long, dark night. Your hunger, though still present, has softened, transformed from a desperate gnawing into a quiet ache. You've journeyed through the most challenging landscapes, witnessed the most extraordinary acts of human ingenuity, and tasted metaphorically, thankfully, the very limits of edibility. Now, as the world slowly awakens around you, it's time to reflect on the enduring legacy of these ancient survival strategies and what they truly teach us about human adaptability in the face of extreme adversity. Let's first delve into the buzzing, skittering world of insects. A food source that, while common in many parts of the world today, is largely rejected by Western palates. Entomophagy. The practice of eating insects is incredibly ancient and widespread. When larger game vanished, when crops failed, insects offered a readily available, often abundant, and surprisingly nutritious alternative. They are packed with protein, healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals ounce for ounce, often more nutrient-dense than traditional meats. Imagine standing here in this modern moment with the knowledge of what our ancestors endured. You look at a simple loaf of bread, and perhaps you see not just flour and water, but the echoes of bark scraped from a pine tree, laboriously ground into a coarse meal. You see a piece of fish, and you might recall the desperate search for barnacles clinging to slippery rocks, or the careful processing of fish scales. Every meal, every morsel of food we take for granted, carries within it the silent, untold stories of countless generations who wrestled sustenance from the most unyielding environments. Think of a locust swarm. To a farmer, it's a devastating plague, a harbinger of ruin. To a starving ancient community, it was a sudden, miraculous, and temporary manna from the heavens. Imagine the frenzy of activity as entire villages would mobilize to collect them. You'd use nets, blankets, or even just your bare hands, scooping up thousands upon thousands of these crunchy, protein-rich morsels. They could be eaten raw, still twitching, offering an immediate burst of energy. Or they could be roasted over a fire, their exoskeletons crisping up, making them easier to chew and digest. Some might even be ground into a paste or dried for later consumption. A sort of ancient insect jerky. It's like a protein bar, but with more legs. You might even say they put the crunch in lunch. The most profound lesson from the ancient table is perhaps the sheer, unyielding adaptability of the human spirit. We are not just creatures of habit, we are creatures of necessity. When faced with the ultimate test starvation, our ancestors didn't simply give up. They innovated, they experimented, they learned, they pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible, transforming their environment from a barren wasteland into a potential larder, albeit a very challenging one. It's like being told you can only use a spoon to build a house, and then figuring out how to make a pretty sturdy one. You might even say they were the original MacGyvers of the culinary world. This wasn't just about locusts. Nearly every type of insect, from plump grubs found in decaying wood to ants, beetles, caterpillars, and even spiders for the truly desperate or adventurous, offered some form of sustenance. The key was knowing which ones were safe to eat and which were toxic. This knowledge, again, was passed down through generations, often through painful trial and error. You wouldn't just grab any bug, you'd learn the specific species, their habitats, and the best times to collect them. Think about the sheer depth of ecological knowledge that was accumulated and passed down. These weren't just random acts of desperation. They were informed by generations of meticulous observation. Which plants were toxic? Which parts of an animal could be rendered edible? How long did a certain root need to be leached? What signs indicated that a mushroom was safe, or that a batch of cassava was detoxified? This was a living encyclopedia, carried in the minds of elders, demonstrated through practice and etched into the collective memory of the community. This knowledge was literally life-saving, far more valuable than any gold or jewels. One common historical truth is that insect consumption was a crucial part of the diet for many ancient hunter-gatherer societies, providing a reliable source of protein and fat, especially in seasons or environments where larger game was scarce. Archaeological evidence, such as insect remains in ancient human coprolites' fossilized feces, confirms their dietary significance. One common historical truth that emerges from studying ancient famine survival is that human societies are incredibly resilient and capable of rapid innovation when faced with existential threats. While famines caused immense suffering and loss of life, they also often spurred the development of new agricultural techniques, food processing methods, and social structures designed to mitigate future food shortages. The lessons learned in times of scarcity were often integrated into daily life, making communities more robust in the long run. Now, let's turn our attention to the silent, often mysterious world of fungi. Mushrooms. Those strange, ephemeral growths that sprout from the earth or decaying wood, presented both a promise and a peril. Some are delicious and nutritious. Others are deadly. For ancient foragers, distinguishing between the two is a matter of life and death. Consider the role of community and shared knowledge. While the previous chapter touched on social stratification, it's also true that in many cases, the survival of the group depended on the collective wisdom and cooperation of its members. The individual who knew how to detoxify a particular plant, or the group that organized a large-scale insect harvest, contributed directly to the survival of everyone. This shared burden, this collective ingenuity, was a powerful force against the isolating despair of hunger. It reminds us that even in the darkest times, humanity's greatest strength often lies in its ability to work together. Imagine you're carefully examining a patch of mushrooms, your heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. You'd study their cap shape, gill structure, stem, and spore print. You'd learn which ones had been eaten safely by your ancestors, and which were associated with sickness or death. This was a high-stakes game of botanical roulette. The knowledge was often guarded, passed down only to trusted individuals, as a mistake could wipe out an entire family or community. The methods we've explored: geophagy, bark consumption, utilizing every part of an animal, foraging for insects and fungi, and the revolutionary power of fermentation and detoxification were not just isolated tricks. They were part of a vast, interconnected web of survival strategies. They demonstrate a holistic approach to the environment, where every element, no matter how unappetizing, was seen as a potential resource. It's like a giant, ancient cookbook, where every ingredient is a challenge, and every recipe is a miracle. Edible mushrooms, even the less palatable ones, offered carbohydrates, some protein, and various micronutrients. They could be eaten fresh, roasted, or dried for preservation. Drying was particularly important, allowing communities to store this ephemeral food source for lean times. You'd string them up on branches or lay them out on rocks in the sun, watching them shrivel and harden, transforming into a shelf-stable food. Ooh, it's like nature's own dehydrated snack pack, but with a higher risk of existential dread. A unique or lesser-known detail that highlights the enduring legacy of these practices is how some famine foods eventually transitioned into being cultural delicacies or even common staples once the immediate crisis passed. For example, while many fermented foods were initially developed for preservation or detoxification, their unique flavors and improved digestibility led to their widespread adoption in normal times. Think of the diverse range of fermented vegetables, grains, and dairy products found in traditional cuisines worldwide. Many have roots in ancient survival techniques. The very inedible became indispensable. It's like your emergency rations becoming your favorite snack. A unique or lesser-known detail in the realm of fungi is the consumption of truffles by ancient peoples. Not as a gourmet delicacy, but as a survival food. While today truffles are prized for their intense aroma and flavor, ancient communities, particularly in regions like the Mediterranean, would have seen them as a hidden, calorie-rich tuber that could be unearthed during times of scarcity. They would have been found by observing pigs or dogs, or simply by recognizing the subtle signs of their presence in the soil. While not as abundant as other fungi, their caloric density and subterranean nature made them a valuable, if rare, find when other foods were gone. It's like finding a gold nugget, but it smells like a gym sock. Gym. The sheer patience and perseverance required for these ancient processing methods are astounding. Leaching cycad seeds for weeks, boiling hides for days, meticulously scraping bark, these were not quick fixes. They demanded an incredible amount of time, labor, and faith that the effort would eventually yield results. In our fast-paced world, where instant gratification is the norm, it's humbling to consider the deep, slow rhythms of ancient survival. They understood that sometimes the longest path was the only path to life. The collection of insects and fungi often involved specific tools and techniques. For insects, it might be digging sticks for grubs, or simple nets for flying swarms. For fungi, it was careful observation and gentle harvesting to ensure the mycelial network, the main body of the fungus, remained intact, allowing for future harvests. This demonstrated an early understanding of sustainable foraging practices. Historians still debate whether the decline of many of these famine food practices in more developed societies was solely due to increased agricultural productivity and global trade, or if there was also a cultural shift that led to a deliberate abandonment of foods associated with hardship and poverty. Did people simply forget the knowledge? Or did they actively choose to distance themselves from a painful past once abundance returned? It's a complex question about memory, progress, and the human desire to leave difficult times behind. The risks associated with these food sources were significant. Misidentifying a poisonous mushroom could lead to agonizing death. Consuming insects that had fed on toxic plants could also be dangerous. This meant that the knowledge of identification and preparation was not just important. It was sacred. It was a legacy of survival, etched into the collective memory of the community. You might find yourself looking at the world around you with new eyes. The weeds in your garden, the insects buzzing in the air, the seemingly barren ground, they all hold hidden potential. A silent testament to the ingenuity of our ancestors. While we are fortunate to live in a time of relative abundance, the lessons from the ancient table remain profoundly relevant. They teach us about resourcefulness, about understanding our environment, and about the incredible strength of the human will. Historians still debate whether the primary motivation for consuming insects and fungi during ancient famines was purely nutritional necessity, or if certain indigenous spiritual beliefs or cultural practices also played a role in making these otherwise unusual food sources acceptable or even revered. Did the ease of collection and high nutritional value drive the practice? Or was there also an element of respecting all forms of life as potential sustenance, even the smallest and strangest? It's a fascinating question about the interplay between pragmatism and worldview. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from Chapter 1? Or the specific type of clay that helped with digestion? These seemingly bizarre solutions were born from the same crucible of necessity that drove people to eat bark or ferment toxic roots. They are all threads in the rich tapestry of human survival, each one a testament to our species' ability to adapt, to innovate, and to find a way, no matter how improbable, to keep the flame of life burning. You might find yourself reflecting on the sheer biodiversity that ancient peoples tapped into. They didn't limit themselves to a few familiar species. They explored every niche, every corner of their environment, seeking out any potential source of energy. This deep ecological knowledge, born of necessity, allowed them to unlock the hidden bounty of the world around them. Even when that bounty was small, scuttling, or growing in the shadows. As you settle deeper into your bed, let the stories of ancient resilience wash over you. The quiet hum of the fan, the dim light, the soft comfort of your surroundings. These are luxuries hard-won by generations who faced the ultimate test. Their struggles, their ingenuity, their sheer will to survive, echo through time, reminding us of the incredible journey that brought us here. There's a quiet strength in knowing what they endured, a profound appreciation for the simple act of a full stomach. Let that understanding be your lullaby tonight. Imagine the quiet hum of insects in the night, no longer a nuisance, but a symphony of potential sustenance. Or the damp, earthy smell of a forest floor, no longer just a scent, but a promise of hidden nourishment. These were the subtle signs that ancient people learned to read. The whispers of survival in a world that often seemed determined to silence them. They didn't just survive, they thrived, in a grim sort of way, by embracing the micro-feast that nature, in its boundless complexity, offered them. It's a testament to the fact that when you're truly hungry, even the smallest things can look like the biggest meal.